Hey guys, Sean here from Players in Green with another tutorial for you. Today we're going to do one on retouching and why it is kind of important to any work you do. So retouching is really huge in mostly beauty and magazines that involve modeling and a lot of things like that. But retouching is something I use often in much of my work because what retouching is doing is changing the highlights and shadowings on a person's body. And here I have this image of LeBron James. It was the quickest thing I could find. And so this is what it looks like with the retouch, and this is what it looks like without. And what you're doing is, like I said, changing the lighting to either increase it or decrease the shadowing in the highlights. Now, there's two different ways to do retouching. And what I mean is there's two different techniques, and I'll show you the tools you would use and how would you go about it. So one way people often do retouching is, so we have our layer of LeBron James and we're going to create a new one. What you're going to do is you're going to go to Edit, Fill, 50% Gray. Now this is going to add this gray layer on top of your image. What you're going to do is overlay it. So now we have it overlaid and it just goes right through the image. And this is so you won't have destructive editing when using the burn and dodge tool. Because what happens is, before we even go to that gray layer, say I start editing this LeBron James with the burn tool, and this burn tool is going to do shadows. Say I don't like that. Well, I can't go back and erase it. I can go to my history and go back. But instead of having to do that every time, it's just easier if you create a new layer, make it 50% gray, and overlay it. So now we'll go to the tools. So you got your dodge and your burn. The dodge tool is going to affect your highlights, and it's going to lighten everything in the image. And your burn tool is going to affect your shadows, so everything is going to get darker. Pretty simple, huh? So with the dodge tool, you have ranges, highlights, shadows, and midtones. And what these are is shadows. So obviously the dark points and the black points in the image. The highlights are the white. And the midtones is everything in between. So colors, anything with color, which is in between black and white. So you want to leave this on highlights. You can change your exposure. Obviously the higher the exposure, the higher the effect of the tool will be. And I'm going to leave that on 50%. And the protective tones, that protects the, I'm trying to think of another word for tone, basically the color in the image, so it won't become distorted. So we're going to leave that on, and this is if you had one of the drawing pads. So alright, so now like I said, we'll touch up some of the highlights in the image. So anywhere that it's light, we're going to increase this light. So I'm just going over all his highlights to bring in light. We're going to pretend the light's, I don't know, coming from in front and up top. Alright, now we're going to go grab our burn tool. Same thing with the burn tool. You got your shadows, highlights, midtones, all the settings. Usually keep them relatively the same. Go through, and we're going to go through all the shadows to increase the strength of these shadows. And really what this is doing, and if you can't tell now, is just making everything, increasing everything, making it more dramatic. See, I mean, maybe if you can't tell now what's happened, but once I undo the layer, it makes a huge difference. And this is really what most people are doing when they're like, oh, I did some retouching, and it's not the most difficult thing to do. It's just understanding the tools and understand the lighting you have in the image and where you should have shadows and highlights. And yeah, look at the difference from the original to now. You can tell he's extremely more dramatic. So that is one way of doing retouching. There's also another way that I'll sometimes use. So we're going to create a new layer, and you're going to use the brush tool. So you're going to get a black and white, you have your black and white brushes, lowering our opacity down to 31, and we're going to change the layer to overlay. It's simply, basically the same thing, and you're going to use your brush tool, like I said, a feather brush, preferably, black for the burn, which would be the shadows, and white for the highlights. And it's effectively the same thing. As you can see, the shadows are getting darker. And like I said, I'm just going over all the dark points in the imagery. Now we're going to switch to white and go over the highlights. And like I said, you usually can't tell until you hide the layer the difference that it's made. But there's quite a difference, and sometimes you're going to want to retouch the background, and to make them really stand out, I honestly would take either the black brush or the burn tool on that other layer and kind of go around them and darken out this background. I mean, if you wanted to, you could also more quickly just select everything but the player in the foreground here, so select all of the background and just make it darker by using the exposure tool. And look at that, you got a more dramatic lighting on your figure. So that's basically the gist of retouching, is just changing the lighting effective to the figure and increasing it, or changing shadows to more of a to make them lighter, to match the lighting in the image, or whatever look you're trying to go for. That's really what retouching is doing, is changing the lighting on the player. And one other thing I wanted to show was the sponge tool, which is also good for retouching. The thing about the sponge tool is it will take any color that is on a player and desaturate it. And why this is great is, like, a player like this, a figure like this, you have light of this red light reflecting on Damian Lillard. Well, say you're in more of a green setting, or a more desaturated setting, and you don't need this red light because you don't have any red light in your design. Well, this is what makes this tool great. So what you're going to want to do is duplicate this layer, because the problem with the sponge tool is if you don't want a destructive edit, you have to duplicate the layer, because there's no way to go back and undo what you did unless you go through your history bar up here. So, alright, after you duplicate your layer, select your sponge tool, and you can either saturate or desaturate. And you get the flow, the direction, and how much it's going to stay in a straight line. And you can change the vibrance. So I'm going to desaturate, because I think it's more effective than using the saturation for this tutorial. And I'm going to select all the red light, and that I want it to be what I want to be removed. And as you can see, this red light is disappearing that's on his body. Now, like I said, it's desaturating it, but it does a good job removing it for the most part without destroying the quality of the image. And some people I know will say, well, why don't you just add a gradient map on top and use that use a black and white gradient and just color overlay, and I'll desaturate it. Well, that's going to desaturate the whole image, and that's not the case what I want. I just want to desaturate parts of the image. And see, there we go, we got rid of all of that red, and now you can match this to any background that you have, because you won't have this errant red light that's coming onto the image, then you don't have any red light in your design. And say, you know, if you wanted to saturate, you can bring out all the saturation in the image, like, yeah, see how much brighter he'll become. And now that we've desaturated his arm, we could resaturate it, but it probably is, yeah, it's going to discolor the image a little bit. Now he's becoming a little too saturated, but you see my point. You know, this is good to affect just small areas of your figure, to saturate them a little bit more if you don't want to saturate the whole entire body. But that's another good thing for retouching to know, is if you want to get rid of light that appears on the figure, you can remove it with the sponge tool and add small sections of saturation. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I haven't done one in a while. I feel like I say that every time I make one. Hopefully I'll be coming out with another one soon. I got a new little trick for backgrounds that I think will be extremely helpful to a lot of people. So hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel, at Players in Green, Instagram, Twitter, Vance. Feel free to leave questions in the comment section. Email me at playersandgreen@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching.